In this video, we're going to take a look at adding and subtracting integers. And I'm calling this section 1-1.5 because I'm kind of adding it in. This will hopefully be a good review of what we were doing towards the end of last year. In that, what would happen if I had 2 plus a negative 1? Well, there's a couple different ways we can think about looking at this. The first way is if we look at a number line. Okay, so if I start at 1, 0, I think about this being negative 1, negative 2, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. What the 2 would tell me to do is start at the number 2. Okay, so I'm going to go right 2. But then if I'm going to add a negative 1, basically that tells me I'll need to go back 1. My final answer will equal then 1. Another way of thinking about this is positive and negative chips. Okay, so if I have 2 positives, I'm going to say the 2 positives are green, and to that I'm going to add 1 negative, which I'm going to do in red. Basically 1 positive, 1 negative, as we learned last night, cancel each other out. So what am I left with? I'm left with 1 positive. Okay. Eventually we want to get to thinking, okay, thinking about money. If I have $2 and then I owe somebody $1, what do I need to do? Well, I need to pay up. So 2, and then I get rid of the $1 that I owe somebody, and I'm left basically then with $1. Okay, what happens if we set this up a little bit differently? What happens instead of having 1 positive, 1 negative? Hopefully you can do 2 positives. 2 plus 3 would equal 5. But let's look at this in terms of saying, let's start at negative 2. To negative 2, I'm going to add, say, negative 3. Well, since they both have the same sign, it's like saying in a number line, okay, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, okay. Let's see. I start with the negative 2. Okay, so I'm going to start at 0. I'm going to go to the left to negative 2. So I've taken care of that. But to that value, I'm going to add a negative 3. Well, if I'm here and I need to go 3 more to the left, that'll bring me to negative 5. Okay, so what we'll begin to realize that here, if I have the same sign and I'm adding the 2 values, and that's going to be important when I'm dealing with integers. I always want to change the sign so I'm dealing with addition. This center sign will always be addition. If it's the same sign, okay, and I'm adding the 2 numbers with the same sign, I'm going to add the numbers and keep the sign. So in this case, I would think about this as being 2 plus 3, and I would know my answer needs to be negative since they're both negative. Over here, if I have 2 numbers and they have a different sign, so one value is positive, one value is negative, and I'm adding the 2, so this is if I have different signs. What I'm basically going to take a look at and do is I'm going to subtract the values, and I'm going to keep the sign of the larger number. So in this case, I have 2 minus 1, which would give me 1. Since 2 is larger than 1, the 2 is positive, my answer will be positive as well. Okay, let's take a look at subtraction. When I'm subtracting integers, basically I'm going to kind of use the keep change flip rule in a sense. So if I have 3 minus 1, hopefully you would tell me that's positive 2. Well, I can represent this in integer language by keeping this number, changing the subtraction to addition, in a sense not flipping necessarily, but in a sense changing the sign, okay, of that number. So if this number is positive, if I'm subtracting a positive number, it becomes adding a negative number. Okay, and then I would follow the rules. Since 3 and 1, or 3 and negative 1 have different signs, I do 3 minus 1 to get 2. The 3 is larger than the 1, the 3 is positive, so my answer is also going to be positive. Let's take a look at this case if this was 3 minus 5. Well, I would keep the 3, I would change this, and I would put this as the opposite. Okay, so since I'm dealing with addition here, okay, what's numbers larger? The 5. Well, what's 5 minus 3? Well, that gives me 2. But in this case, since the 5 is larger and the 5 is negative, my answer will also need to be negative. Okay, I can also do this if this gets a little bit more complicated. Let's say this is negative 3 minus 4. Once again, I would keep the negative 3, change this to a positive, change this to a negative. So in this case, I have the same sign here and here. So I would add the two numbers. 3 plus 4 would give me 7. But since the sign on both numbers is negative, I'm dealing with a negative number. Okay, and this would make sense. If you owe $3 to somebody, you borrow another $4 from them, you're in debt $7. So it kind of makes sense. Well, what happens if my second number is negative? So let's say I have 3 minus then a negative 4. I'm going to still use the same rules, okay, of keeping the first number. I'm going to change this from a subtraction to addition, and then I would also need to change this sign from a negative, or kind of flip that sign from a negative to positive. What's 3 plus 4? Okay, well that's going to be 7. So subtracting integers is really going to be the same thing as adding integers. It's just remembering to change the subtraction to addition and then change the sign of the second number. So it actually operates a little bit like fractions with keep, change, flip. Hope this has been helpful. Looking forward to doing some work with integers tomorrow.